I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. Welcome to Friday. We begin tonight with more fallout over the lack of public defenders in Oregon. It's kind of a big deal. Without a lawyer, people cannot exercise their constitutional rights when accused of a crime, and that is a problem. In Eugene, federal Judge Michael McShane says that constitutional right is so important that anyone statewide now being held in jail without a lawyer must be released after 7 days if they don't get that lawyer. And that is definitely our big story tonight. The judge estimated his ruling could impact roughly 135 people across the state who are being held in jail without a public defender. He's clearly concerned that the practice violates their constitutional rights, writing, "In essence, they have been locked away without a voice, being too poor to afford an advocate to speak for them in the courtroom." The judge's opinion notes that the defendants are appointed a public defender when they first appear in court, but then no one ever actually shows up to help them with their case. He also points out that some are being held in custody for weeks and sometimes months without an attorney, and that defendants have appeared at as many as 8 proceedings without counsel, including things like arraignments, release hearings, and case management hearings. So that's the group the judge is most concerned about. He said that because their constitutional right to a lawyer is being denied and they're being harmed by being locked up, that they must be released if no lawyer can be found for them within that 7-day span. McShane's ruling expands on an earlier decision this summer that required criminal defendants in just Washington County be released after 10 days if they could not get an attorney. But this ruling, also from McShane, this extends to every single county in Oregon and decreases the number of days from 10 down to 7. So what's that going to mean for places like Washington County now? I talked with the district attorney, Kevin Barton, about that this afternoon.
I checked this morning, and the most up-to-date information we have is we have 4 people who are currently in our jail who are without lawyers. And you know, in the weeks following Judge McShane's initial ruling, things have gotten a little bit better in Washington County. So the court has done a better job at finding attorneys for the people who are in jail and unrepresented. The majority of those people have received attorneys within that 10-day period of time that Judge McShane had originally ordered. So I think that this is something that is absolutely manageable, and it's definitely a standard that the state and the courts should be able to meet, the 7-day standard.
Okay, well, all right, that's encouraging to hear on this Friday, because the judge's ruling applies to every county in the state. We also then checked with Clackamas County's DA.
Clackamas County's been fortunate in that we haven't had in custody indigent defendants who haven't been able to get counsel. We do have out of custody defendants who are still seeking legal representation, but so far this opinion won't affect Clackamas County at all.
Okay, well, thanks for your time. Sorry to bother you. Statewide, there are around 2,700 people currently out of jail, charged with a crime, and not represented by a lawyer. Those are out of custody defendants that Wentworth mentioned. The judge's ruling does not affect those folks, only the ones who are sitting in jail. And it's worth noting that 7-day release does not take effect for another 2 weeks. It's unclear whether this ruling will have much impact in the greater metro area. We also contacted Multnomah County's district attorney's office to ask how many people are locked up in Multnomah County without a lawyer. They said, you know, we'll get back to you next week sometime with that. Okay. Overall, it appears that Judge McShane's ruling is basically shoring up a practice that seems to be already getting better, making sure that people who are locked up do get a lawyer. Although this is such a highly charged topic, don't be surprised if it gets appealed up to the 9th Circuit Court of Appeals. We'll be watching. What do you think about this latest twist in the public defender crisis? Do you side with Judge McShane's ruling? Why or why not? Let us know, will you? You could email us. The address is thestory@kgw.com, or go ahead and call and leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090. Now let's get to some of your thoughts on the projected costs of Portland's new form of government that begins in 2025. During yesterday's show, we showed you the council-approved structure of the city departments. There'll be 6 of them: budget and finance, city operations, community and economic development, public safety, vibrant communities, and public works. Each will have a deputy city administrator in charge of them, and those people will report to the city administrator, who will be appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the city council. The administrator will have an assistant, and that person will be in charge of several new positions. The new city council is made up of 12 people who will each make around $133,000 a year. The estimated price tag for all of it, nearly $24 million a year. What were voters told last fall when they voted to change the government structure? A little lower than that. They were told the ceiling of the estimate was $8.7 million. That's on top of the $10 million that the government currently costs in the current form. So yeah, not going to be cheap. And that $24 million a year is only an estimate. So actually it could get even higher. Some of you at home are thinking, I told you so.
My comment should be brief. When you talked about the change in government in Portland, that is exactly why I did not vote for it last year. I kept asking and asking, how much is this going to cost? How are we going to afford 12, 13, 14 people in government when we only have 6 or 7 now? We got hoodwinked and people believed it.
All right, thank you, Barbara. A viewer who did not leave a name wrote in, I didn't vote for this measure, on par with Portland being an outlier and reinventing the wheel. It will cost taxpayers money we didn't agree to, and we'll see no real outcome from spending. All the while, our roads and parks crumble, graffiti and homeless are still rampant despite billions being spent. Portland being Portland.
I don't like this new city council thing. By the time they get it down, it'll be 30 million or more. I think this is ridiculous. They need to rethink things.
All right, thank you, Casey. Jim wrote in to us, I am here to say, hell no. The plan calls for 12 counselors and staff whose only responsibility is to make policy. 12 to do less than the entire city council, current city council, and to be elected by ranked choice voting. This guarantees incompetence and likely puts the less capable in office. But despite all the skepticism and negativity, one viewer named Michael had this to say.
I'll keep it simple. If we spend the money and we get this new form of government and it's functional, well, at that I say we're way ahead of the game and we'll keep it.
Thank you, Michael. As we say all the time on the show, time will tell, but we'll be keeping an eye on the costs of the process as it moves forward toward implementation in just over a year now. Moving on to a promise we made to you yesterday about your power and natural gas bills for the coming year. If you're a PGE customer, and there are tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of you, expect a rate increase of at least 17% on January 1st. The company tells us the average customer means that will pay about $22 more a month. That 17% rate hike could go even higher. That depends on rulings by the Oregon Public Utility Commission that are expected to come out before the end of the year. But for low-income families who are already having trouble paying the power bill, PGE's program to cover some of those costs is becoming a bit more consumer-friendly. You know, a bit. It's called the Income Qualified Bill Discount Program. Now, as you might guess, you qualify for help with your power bill based on your household's gross income. That means before taxes. The utility says that if you've qualified for energy assistance in the past, you probably do qualify now. Here's a look at the income requirements. If you have 4 people in your household and everyone 18 or older has a combined gross income that's about $64,000 a year or less, congratulations, you qualify. A household with just 2 people would need to make less than $43,000 a year before taxes. And here's a look at how the program is changing on January 1st, the same time that big rate increase is set to hit. There on the left, SMI bins means state median income. The way to read this is somewhat confusing. It's like this, though. Right now, the top 15% of people who qualify for energy assistance can get 25% of their monthly power bill covered. From 16 to 45%, those folks can get 20% covered. But starting in 2024, the top 5% of people who qualify can get 60% of their bill forgiven. That's pretty hefty. The next chunk of people would get 40% off, and so on. If you want to see if you qualify or if you'd like to apply, you can visit the website here on your screen. The best way to get there is to type in portlandgeneral.com/IQBD. I know I said that fast. Here you go again. The acronym is for Income Qualified Bill Discount. The website one more time. You can see it there at the bottom of your screen. portlandgeneral.com/IQBD. Now, let's talk about natural gas and a rate drop for the nearly 700,000 Northwest Natural Gas customers that just took effect on this past Wednesday. Here's a look at what that means for your next bill. The average customer, according to the company, will see a savings of about, $8. I think that's maybe 2 lattes these days. The average bill is near $90 now and will drop accordingly. Small commercial customers save about $25. Big industrial companies will get a break of more than $550. Why did that happen? Well, it's mostly due to lower costs of natural gas in the first place, some overcollection of revenues from customers last year, and the forecast that future costs of natural gas will remain lower, all of which is great. But don't get used to it. Northwest Natural says it expects to file for rate increases next year to help buy things called community climate investments, which help them comply with an Oregon Department of Environmental Quality program that's focused on emissions. We heard from Mike Getz, General Counsel to the Oregon Citizens Utility Board. They advocate for consumers when the State Utility Commission is deciding on these rate changes.
The Oregon Department of Environmental Quality's Climate Protection Program, which sets a historical baseline of emissions reductions that emitters like Northwest Natural and other gas utilities have to get under by a certain future date. And there's several different ways for them to comply with the Climate Protection Program, one of which is to purchase the community climate investments that you alluded to. Another is to invest in different types of decarbonized gas. One is called renewable natural gas. There's also different types of hydrogen investments that the utilities can make. However, those investments are a lot more expensive than the community climate investments that Northwest Natural is planning to make.
So you have that. The utility initially filed to increase rates this year to cover those climate investment costs, and then they realized, well, those are not going to be available until next year. And so that's why they will file to increase rates sometime next year, all to comply with these green goals of the future.
So we're really doing what we can to make sure that, again, we're meeting our decarbonization goals in Oregon in the least cost way and protecting customers that are on the natural gas system and rely on it as a heating fuel. The cheapest electron and the cheapest gas therm is the one that you never have to produce and generate in the first place. And so if we can get customers and the utilities to invest heavily in energy efficiency and other programs like demand response that get benefits and dollars back into customers' pockets as we're making these transitions, we're going to be pushing the utilities to do that.
Still to come on the story. When you hear the term mass timber, what comes to mind? Rows and rows of wood planks? Well, it's actually a newer kind of timber that's engineered in a way to build housing much faster than usual timber. And it's even touted to reduce wildfire risk. We'll take you inside a Washington factory to show you how it's made and share when it will be used to build housing right here in Portland when the story returns. Well, this is pretty cool. You're looking at a behind-the-scenes preview of the new main terminal at Portland International Airport. The big reveal is set for May 2024, with construction wrapping up in late 2025. But it's hard to miss the topping of the area, a 9-acre, 18 million pound wooden roof sourced almost entirely from forests in Oregon and Washington. The curves you see are supported by glue laminated beams that were built from 2 million board feet of mass timber. Mass timber does not just mean wood. It's a broad term that describes engineered wood products. Those are made by binding layers of wood together to form solid panels for beams. And the idea of mass timber is catching on here in the timber-heavy Pacific Northwest for two main reasons. Number one, it can help reduce wildfire risk and be used to quickly build much-needed housing. I guess that was number two. Jeremy Legou from our Environmental Northwest team shows us how it all comes together.
Inside a factory, where the sound of saws and lumber makes it difficult to think.
This is our CNC machines.
These massive boards are paving the way for some even bigger ideas.
So each one of these is one layer of the panel.
But it all starts with this. Some of the smallest trees in the forest. At 8 to 12 inches in diameter, these logs are too small for your typical mills, but plenty big enough to start a wildfire.
We have this environmental forest health crisis leading these catastrophic fires.
Washington's Forest Health Plan calls for reducing wildfire hazards, but until recently, removing these smaller pieces of wood was expensive, with cost limiting the amount of forest cleanup work the state could do.
We never had somebody who could buy that smaller diameter, and therefore we couldn't sell it. And when you can't sell it, it either rots on the forest floor or gets burned, and then creates an environmental challenge for us.
Enter mass timber. The factory in Spokane Valley is one of 2 mass timber facilities in Washington, offering the state a revenue source for the smaller wood as it seeks to clean up forests and prevent wildfires.
So in order to make the 60-foot long boards, we have to take all those little shorter 6 to 16-foot boards and finger join them together.
Mass timber refers to large wood products like these 60-foot panels. Mercer Mass Timber specializes in cross-laminate timber, or CLT. The process allows the company to make use of shorter boards, which it bonds together to create massive wood panels. Those panels are then cut to fit together.
We know exactly where that piece in all the millions of square feet, it's got a unique spot that it gets dropped into.
A process that's a lot like...
It's like putting a package of Lego together, following the directions. You know, every piece has a place for it.
And if you're wondering what those pieces can create, just take a peek outside the factory doors.
The 2 levels, the main levels, were done in one day in the middle of probably the worst blizzard of that winter.
Seattle-based Green Canopy Node worked with Mercer to build this test house, which came together 49% faster than a typical build, a significant time savings in a region starved for more housing.
It's all pre-planned, pre-engineered, and it's just assembling the thing, so it makes it much simpler.
The company will take what it learned from this build and use it on future products that are planned to go up in Seattle and Portland next year.
We're in the state of Washington. We can fly things the size of buildings through the air. We need to apply that mentality to helping to solve our housing crisis.
Back in the forest, the hope is that more mass timber-based construction will mean more forest cleanup and fewer large wildfires.
And now we've been able to take that environmental challenge of dying, dead, diseased trees and burn into the atmosphere and turn it into a wood product that actually can make our built environment cleaner and greener, and it also can help truly build at a faster pace and scale the kinds of homes that we need to address our housing crisis.
I don't know about you, but I was watching that saying, wow, how cool is that? Multiple times. We're told another benefit of mass timber is that it's more fire resistant than typical wood because the massive panels burn in a real predictable way. The company compares it to the char you get on a log in a campfire rather than a bunch of kindling starting on fire. The first project for the Green Canopy Node company that you heard about is a house on Bainbridge Island early next year. After that, they do have 2 projects here in Portland to build 24 housing units, followed by an apartment building in Seattle. Up next on the story, the clocks fall back this weekend for daylight saving time. But what's the deal with Congress seemingly getting close to making it permanent so that we can leave the clocks alone? And by the way, Oregon and Washington have passed bills to keep daylight saving time year-round, but it's not going to be implemented yet. We'll explain why when the story returns. Oh yeah, this time change thing. Let's get to a comment from viewer Michael, who wrote to us, Congress must act on daylight saving time. No, not to make it permanent. How about a law banning the biannual lamenting of its existence? Thanks for that. The clocks do fall back this weekend, and for some of you, well, that's great, but others not so thrilled. Wasn't there a bill in Congress to end all the clock back and forth? Yes, there was. Let's explain.
We're all familiar with our twice-annual cue to spring forward or fall backward. But didn't Oregon and Washington get rid of this? Yes, we'll get to that. So why are we still changing the clocks, and how did we get here? Well, back in 1966, Congress passed the Uniform Time Act, establishing daylight saving time nationwide. By the way, it is saving, not savings. Oregon was already on board back then, having done the same 4 years before that. The idea to turn the clocks forward 1 hour on the last Sunday in April and then turn them back on the last Sunday in October. Basically, it lets humans make better use of daylight as the sun rises and sets later and later throughout the summer. The official time change happens at 2 a.m. when most of us, hopefully, are asleep. In 2005, Congress extended the daylight saving time window, scheduling us to spring forward in March and fall back in November. Well, a lot of people find these frequent time shifts kind of annoying. Some states like Arizona don't observe daylight saving time at all. In 2019, Oregon and Washington decided to take a page out of their book. But lawmakers instead passed a bill to keep both states on daylight saving time all year round. In other words, the schedule we use during the summer would become our schedule all year. But, and this is key, none of us can actually make that switch yet, because for that to happen, we need approval from Congress and the President. In short, we're stuck in legislative limbo waiting on D.C. And that's how we got here.
In March of last year, the U.S. Senate passed the Sunshine Protection Act with the intention of making daylight saving time permanent this past spring. It looked promising considering that it passed the chamber unanimously, but the U.S. House did not consider the bill, citing higher priorities like the budget and the war in Ukraine. Okay. That same bill was reintroduced in March of this year, but then it was sent to a committee and does not appear to be going anywhere. Same goes for a companion bill on the House side. And even if one of those bills passed in both chambers, it would still need to be signed by President Biden, who has not said how he feels about daylight saving time. So the tradition, like it or not, continues at 2 o'clock in the morning this Sunday. Now, for a lot of people, daylight saving time in the fall can be the beginning of the winter blues, as it feels so much like our time away from work is just spent in the dark. Dr. Paul Geiger of Providence Health says the time change takes our bodies out of the natural rhythm and can create more stress, leading to things like depression and insomnia. His advice? Good sleep hygiene.
So that would be like, getting up at the same time every day, trying to go to bed at the same time as well. But getting up is the real key thing. The best sleep medicine is a busy day, and if you've got a 16-hour busy day, you're more likely to get good sleep.
All right. The doc also says try to avoid caffeine after noon and exercising too late in the day. Probably should not have been sipping this caffeinated tea during the commercial breaks. Anyway, that's the end of our show. Thanks so much for watching, and remember the story, our collective story, that never ends. Straight Talk with Laurel Porter is coming up next. Enjoy your weekend, and I'll see you right back here on Monday night at 6:30.